Thank you so much for tuning into today's program featuring Eddie Glaude and Don Cheadle. I'm Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Bloc, now in our 25th year. I also want to thank Eso Won Bookstore for partnering with Writer's Bloc today. You know Eddie Glaude from Time Magazine, from MSNBC, and from his books on race in America. In Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own, Eddie rolls back the curtain on James Baldwin and his evolution from literary artist to reluctant civil rights activist and leader. Eddie weaves his own personal relationship with racism, Baldwin, and America into a conversational essay that asks Black and white Americans, who are we and who do we want to be? This is a book about Black rage, both Eddie Glaude's and Baldwin's. It's about the American nightmare, or the American lie set up against the American dream. Don't worry if you don't remember everything or even anything about Baldwin. Eddie drives you to think about Baldwin's work as a starting point for understanding race in America post Dr. King. Start with the foreword, and I dare you to put this book down. Buy it and read it. Visit Eso Won Bookstore or find the link on our website, writersblockpresents.com, to get your copy. Don Cheadle is, of course, an award-winning actor and director, but he's also an author and an actor dedicated to social justice. His relationship to Baldwin is longstanding. In 2003, Don read passages from Baldwin in a documentary called James Baldwin, Witness. I'm so delighted to present Don Cheadle and Eddie Glaude. Thanks.
Thank you. Be here. That was a mouthful. Good job.
Fast.
Indeed.
How are you, Eddie? Good to see you.
Man, I'm just smiling like a chess cat looking at you, you know? This is so amazing. This is amazing.
Well, I just want to say, first, I think I need more books in my background. I'll work on that. A lot of them are, but I just want to say thank you and for being here and allowing us to have a conversation around this very insightful and important work. It's your take on Baldwin's work. You're bringing yourself to his work, your sort of meditation with him, your conversation with him, your examination of yourself through him and through his work is a really interesting way into it, and it really a very compelling way to sort of get to who he is and what he means to us today. I'm going to read some of these. I have so many thoughts. I mean, so many dog-eared pages and so many underlined quotes, but I will try to get to some of them in this time. But I guess I want to just ask you first, what was your inspiration for this book? And why was your then so much our now, and James Baldwin's now so appropriate and applicable again and again?
Well, first of all, let me just say how excited I am to be in conversation with you. You're a master of your craft. You bring excellence to the table. Every time I've witnessed you, that performance with Miles. I mean, I could just go on and on and on and on. Even to my nerddom, right? Watching you do War Machine, right? It's just crazy, right? So it's just amazing. Just wanted to lift you up in everything that you do in your life and in your craft.
Thank you.
So, I've been walking with Baldwin for 30 years. He's been informing and shaping my work, my scholarship, my understanding of myself as an intellectual. And so I decided to finally bring him from behind the curtains into the front, onto the stage, and make him, an explicit interlocutor. My last book, Democracy in Black, he was everywhere. In A Shade of Blue, he is the epigraph of every chapter except for the last chapter. So finally, I decided, well, let me think with him. So my initial idea, Don, was to write a biography, an intellectual biography of Jimmy. And then I realized that I couldn't say anything new about him because some of the material, the archive is embargoed for 30 years.
Right.
So we won't get that biography for a while. And then as I was looking out in the world and just getting angrier and more enraged as white supremacy was not just simply rearing its head, but emboldened in every aspect of our lives, and watching it touch my child and the like. I had to do something with my own anger and despair and disillusionment. So I found myself in Heidelberg. And at the moment in which I landed, I'm not in Heidelberg for an hour. And I see the police with their knee in the back of a black man who's screaming at the top of his lungs. And then I said, oh, this is the kind of book I need to write. I need to write a book about betrayal, about despair and disillusionment. How do we pick up the pieces? And then it led me to the late Jimmy, who said, you know, I want you to look among my ruins and hopefully you will find something useful there. And I found Begin Again.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad you did. And that story, as you tell the story, it again has these echoes of James Baldwin's travels and the lessons that he's learning, and, you know, his pulling that into his work and making that a part of his present day, and why he needs to write to us and speak to us. So can you talk to us a bit about the lie that sort of centers this book, the idea of James Baldwin and America?
Sure. You know, sure. You know, and the thing is that you asked, I didn't answer part of the first question, and that is, you know, the timelessness of what we're talking about. You know, this idea of white people being valued more than others, and how that valuation evidences itself in forms of policing, how it evidences itself in the distribution of advantage and disadvantage. It's the through line in American history, right? It happens under different material conditions, but this different way in which people are valued because of the color of their skin evidences itself each generation. Right. And so I found myself writing and found myself listening to Jimmy, and everything seemed so relevant. I remember teaching Baldwin during the 2016 election, and my students were like, oh my God, it was like an OMG class, right? Because they kept reading passages and then looking up and seeing it in their immediate world. And so I've been trying to come up with this language, Don, that could help us, a shorthand. And so the value gap, it's underneath the wealth gap and the empathy gap. And then what is the value gap? It's evidenced in our habits. How those habits take root, we tell ourselves lies. And what's that lie? Baldwin says, I have it on page 9, he says, the people who settled the country had a fatal flaw. They could recognize a man when they saw one. They knew he wasn't anything else but a man. But since they were Christian, and since they had already decided that they came here to establish a free country, the only way to justify the role this chattel was playing in one's life was to say that he was not a man. For if he wasn't, then no crime had been committed. That lie is the basis of our present trouble. So they had to tell a lie about our capacities, about our passions, about who we are, to dehumanize and degrade us, build a discourse around it, and then build a society to reflect that, and then tell lies about what they were doing in the world in the name of this idea of whiteness, and then lie whenever something tries to reveal the reality of their false innocence. And this lie, in some ways, keeps white America from seeing themselves honestly, and it damn sure keeps them from seeing us. And it just reproduces itself every generation. So we just have to tell the truth about what it is, you know?
And do you have any hope, I don't know if that's the right word, or any idea about how, other than bearing witness, which you talk about a lot, and you put in your inscription to me, which I appreciate very much, is a way to get at that lie, is a way to attack that lie over and over? It's a constant and consistent thing that we have to do over and over again. I mean, if it's in the bedrock of who and how we are in this country together, it seems like it's a constant job.
Yeah, it's exhausting too, you know. It's you know, Jimmy said that one of the most exhausting experiences of being Black in the country is the ongoing demand to convince white America that what's happening to us is real. You know?
And there's another quote that he said that, I mean, I'm trying to look for when talking about being exhausted, that because the one who finds no way to rest cannot long survive the battle.
Yeah, you know, he's really talking about that moment in Los Angeles when he's trying to convince one of the major houses to do Malcolm right.
Right.
And he's just exhausted, and he understands, because in this moment the bribe is there. right? Because we're always faced with the bribe, right?
Yes. Yes.
To concede to the lie.
Yes.
And he understands it, and he says, I got to figure out how to extract myself from this. But I think bearing witness, making the suffering real, in those moments when we find ourselves like we are now, in a moment of moral reckoning, to stand in the breach, to try to open up the space so that we could be otherwise. But it feels Sisyphean,
Yes. Yes. I mean, yes. Yeah. And I'm thinking of, the moment when we personally connected. It was around the op-ed that you wrote, when we were really talking about grief and really talking about, can we have a collective grief around, and this, I think this predated the George Floyd incident, this predated Ahmaud Arbery, this predated Breonna Taylor. You were talking about it in terms of COVID, in terms of what we were dealing with in the country, and saying, can we even share as a people? Can we come together over this? We understand that we're siloed in these different political identities and racial identities, but can grief be raceless and colorless and not political? And that was a question. Of course, there was no answer. It was just sort of a meditation on that question. And it seems like it's even a deeper one now, as that it hasn't receded as far as being something that's affecting us, but it's sort of receded in thought as to what we're dealing with right now.
It's so real. Baldwin wrote it was published in January of 1987 in, of all places, Playboy. Back in the day when Playboy used to publish some serious work.
That's the only reason I ever looked at it.
But that piece is entitled "To Crush a Serpent," where he's basically dismissing white evangelicalism, and he says suffering is our bridge. Right? That if my suffering can lead me to see your suffering, then maybe we could help each other through that suffering and see each other otherwise. Or that moment in the archive when I found, those little memo pads that you could tear out. Yeah. And I found a little note that he had written to Robert Kennedy after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And he was like, I know we disagreed in '63, but your suffering, what you're experiencing, we know. And maybe this could be the bridge. And here we are with people having, as I wrote about it in the post, you can't sit shiva.
Right.
You can't go to the wake and send people you love home. Right. When Marcellus couldn't couldn't play in the second line for his daddy.
Right.
Right. And these people are playing politics with 130,000 plus dead. We can't even come together on that. It gives you a sense of how broken we are on the inside. And that this is just a reflection of that interior mess that Jimmy wanted us to confront from the very beginning,
Yes, and if you have an inability to do that, how will you ever be whole? How will that ever come together? And again, that's something that was, it's surprising to me in ways about Baldwin, that he is always trying to find that place where we can come together. As strongly as he points out the lie, as strongly as he talks about the fallacy of white supremacy and what has been done to us and the horrors that have been inflicted generationally, he at the end of it is still trying to find some way to bring it together and to bring us together, knowing that it can't happen if we're siloed. It cannot happen unless that fracture is somehow mended in some way.
You hit it so, it's so right. There's an interview in the late 60s in Istanbul where he was saying, it's still about this love thing. Right. How did he try to do? He says something to this effect, trying to get the human being right. Trying to get us to stand in right relation with one another, which is a technical definition of non-domination, but in order to do that, we have to deal with our wound, our pain, our trauma. And, that wound and pain guided Baldwin's eyes, and it dripped from his pen, right? Because it's that which makes us so profoundly human in some ways. Right. And it's all of these categories that keep us from seeing the human being right in front of us. That's why I think he was so attracted to to the Ambassadors by Henry James, right? There's something about, right, these commitments, these shibboleths that keeps us from seeing the human being right in front of us. And he's not talking about some mamby-pamby sentimental notion of we're all human beings kind of stuff.
Right.
No. So I think you're absolutely right. Even in the end, because he says we're miracles and disasters.
Right.
But
yes.
We're miracles.
And is it possible to get to that place where we can, through that lens, see each other as, both the beautiful and shattered and, amazing and shameful creatures as human beings that we are, without, or how does it work in concert with continuing to attack the lie and continuing to, is there a prescription? Is there a prescriptive way to do both? Or is it just the messy way that we have to just kind of keep going forward and looking for how to do it? Does he speak about that in any ways in your mind?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think doing both is messy.
Yeah.
There's no, pristine path to this. We have to tell the truth. We have to tell the truth about what we've done so that we can release ourselves into being otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
As long as America thinks of itself as Never Never Land.
Yes.
As long as we're in this space where there's no reason to hold us accountable or for us to be responsible, we will still be in swaddling clothes. We will still be children. We will never step into a maturity that requires us to be responsible for not only what we've done, but who we aspire to be. And so we have to tell the truth, and tell the truth with courage and commitment and love, but tell the truth. And, I honestly believe, and I write this in the book, that the idea of white America is irredeemable. There's nothing about it that can be salvaged. If you have a society predicated on the belief that because of the color of your skin, you ought to be valued more than others, there is nothing about that that's redeemable. But that doesn't mean we're irredeemable.
Right.
And that's the distinction we have to make. And that's the distinction that Jimmy was making day in and day out, even when he was at his angriest.
Right.
If that makes sense.
And that it's not about individuals. It's not about Jim and Sue and Eric and Phil. It's about a concept. It's about an idea, like you say, that the lie that overarches all of it, that this is somehow, that has been has really been codified in how this country was created. So you're talking about deep institutionalized things that have to be undone and constantly attacked to get to any truth.
Yeah, when he resigned from the Liberator over some anti-Semitic remarks in the late 1960s, he wrote this line, man, and every time I say it, it brings chills to me. And I've been saying it in every interview, and so people might not think it's genuine, but it really is. I literally boil over in emotion. He says, I want us to do something unprecedented.
I was going to ask.
And that is to create a self without the need for an enemy.
Creating an enemy, exactly, without the need.
Man,
that. Well, and that's something that because I keep trying to come back to, and it's something else that he talked about in terms of Black identity politics, or in terms of seeing ourselves in relationship to the lie, and not somehow being able to take ourselves out of that and see ourselves wholly without having to point to that as even being something that determines who we are. And it's so weird, like it's a very tricky alchemy. It's a very messy alchemy to redefine yourself in terms of your own selfness and own centeredness, as opposed to going, I have to call that out in this certain way and say, I'm not that. It's like, what are you irrespective of all of those things? That's really, really tricky.
And to do it without it kind of falling into some crude, crass, capitalist understanding of individualism. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But to embrace a notion of individuality. He has this line in the essay, Black Power. He says, the moment Black people step outside of the orbit of white people's expectations of them, we're talking revolution. Right? So this idea, that we can actually use this life to create individual art, that this body of mine is the canvas upon which I can create art, that just because I'm Black doesn't mean, right, that I don't have a distinctive signature that is my own voice, that I
Mm-hmm.
have to find and seek. And to do so is not to buy into some, idea of individualism that detaches me from others, but
Right.
to understand my own individuality in community with others, right? Is profound. And that is often cut off from Black folk because we're often lumped into this undifferentiated blob, of just Black people. And this is who we are. And this is the
Right.
expectation of who we are.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy queered all of that, man.
Yeah.
When he walked into a room, this vulnerable, fragile looking dude who loved who he loved,
Right.
queered Black politics, queered American politics, queered the American story, and offers us a pathway to imagine ourselves differently. I think that's what I'm arguing, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true and it's real. And we're seeing, if we had James Baldwin now, it's like with the way that door has started to be cracked open, and the way that we have those voices now finding their way, and even in my business, that has, even today, there's more and more news about CBS making sure that 40% of their writers' rooms are BIPOC, and that they're moving toward making sure that there's more representation in all of these places, so that our stories can be more heard, and that the queer stories can be heard, and that the non-centered voices can now be more heard. It's not like we haven't had these moments come before,
Right.
I think I think human beings don't find it very difficult to be in that cognitive dissonance of the this and the that. It's hard to hold those things together and continue to go forward and not get exhausted and not want to just go like, hey man, can we just go back to where I didn't have to think so hard, didn't have to feel so much. So that's always the challenge. And I think about him, like, were he to walk into a writer's room now, and how that would just be so supercharged and amazing to hear his perspective and to see his take on a lot of this stuff right now.
Oh, it would be amazing. That's why I wanted to walk with him,
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to write with him in this moment. But America is going back to this point about how our perennial adolescence, in these moments of fatigue, and we're already hearing the reassertion of the lie.
Right.
Even as we're taking down statues and debating names of military bases and the like. And I keep telling people, you got Confederate statues, that's easy. I said, Chicago's highways are monuments, baby.
Oh yeah.
We need to understand the whole. I mean, they bisecting cities for a reason.
Right.
The built environment of America is a monument to this ideology. We need to understand that. But America is so quick, because we're so immature in some ways, to congratulate ourselves and then expect gratitude. Right?
Yes.
Oh, we did it. You should be thankful. And we
Yeah.
actually heard it out of Governor Cuomo's mouth. Y'all have achieved what you've achieved. Go on home now.
Yeah, move on.
And move on.
Yeah.
Right. So we're just gonna tinker around the edges and leave the through line untouched. Right? No. If we're gonna fundamentally change, it seems to me, we not only need to tell the truth, we need to, and not only do we need to reconcile, we need to repair. And that requires some hard work. As I put, I'm from Mississippi, ain't no going back to the normal, bro.
Yeah. I pray not, because going back always feels like it's not just a place to where you were. It feels like it's a further step back, because it has to, in some ways, like you said, congratulate itself and go, we already did that. So it's like, so now we can't even have that conversation again, because we already had the conversation. We already had the Black Lives Matter. They painted it on the street. Guys, we're good. You won. So now let's just get on about the business of getting on and making money. And like you said, doing the things that we need to do to make us feel like we're not in that struggle anymore. And I think that's a human thing. It's not just a white America thing. It's a human thing to want to let go of that and just get back to where you can exhale and breathe. But yeah, the cost of doing that now could be even more fateful than it was before, because it's been so cracked open, I feel.
Yeah, there's a version of the question that Jimmy mentioned back in the days when he was writing. He says, whenever we hear this question beginning to write, to make itself heard, what else does the Negro want?
Mm-hmm.
We know we're back at square one. We're about to hear the lie.
Right.
And his response is, whenever you hear somebody say, what else does the Negro want? You know what we want. That's
Right.
clear.
Right.
We want to be treated like everybody else. But the question reflects the frame. And the frame is, even among liberals, that racial justice and racial equality is a philanthropic enterprise.
Mm.
It's a charitable gesture, something that they can give to us. And when they're done and tired giving, we should just go on and be grateful and going about our business.
Right.
And we got to break that frame if we're going to break free into being different kinds of human beings.
This may be sort of an elliptical way into
Sure.
it, but I'm wondering about you speak about the after times.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're in that period. Would you consider that now to be where we are?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about that a bit, James Baldwin's idea of that and your sort of interpretation of that through the work?
Yeah, so I get the phrase from Walt Whitman's Democratic Vistas. I love Walt Whitman, as complicated and racist as he was. I finally came to embrace him on my own terms after I rejected him for my own reasons. But after times, he's writing in this moment after the tumult of the Civil War and Reconstruction, and he sees the Gilded Age on the horizon. He sees the umbilical cord around the baby's neck, and he's trying to write in this moment. Jimmy was writing in that moment after the assassination of Dr. King, and he saw Ronald Reagan on the horizon. They were going to elect this B-list Hollywood actor who could charm, who can charm his way to the White House, who would then serve as the avatar to undo everything that everybody sacrificed their lives for.
Right.
And so he was trying to tell the story in such a way that in this moment, this interregnum, that the nation faced a choice, that something was trying to be born as something was dying while we were doubling down on the ugliness.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are in our own moment. We elect Barack Obama, the first Black president, and you heard people saying, oh, we turned the corner, we put this race thing behind us. Even on CNN, somebody declared, no more excuses. I was like, get the hell out of here. Exactly. No more excuses. It was the former secretary, Bill Bennett, the former Secretary of Education, said that. And then what did we see almost immediately afterwards? The vitriol of the Tea Party, voter ID laws, voter suppression.
Sharp rise in super right wing, groups. Yeah.
And then we vomited up Donald Trump.
Exactly.
These are our after times. So in this moment where we thought there was a breakthrough, which it probably was, not only did we get Occupy and Black Lives Matter, we got this underbelly of America making itself evidenced. And now we face a choice, right? Because it's all, the genie's out of the bottle now.
Right.
And the question is, will the country double down on its ugly commitments in this moment? Or will it give birth to a new America? And as I write in the book, these other two moments, the umbilical cord of white supremacy has been wrapped around the baby's neck and choked the life out the new America. So we have to be midwives.
Absolutely.
As Jimmy said. We have to be the midwives, as Jimmy said.
Is there any midwifery happening? Are there any scissors that are going to be pulled out during this next election, potentially? Is there, do you have any, and I use that word hope cautiously, and I don't want to be Pollyanna about it, but I do think that's sort of, that's kind of the word. Do we have any sort of, are we looking forward to a potential of being able to get that cord a little more loose, and what will be our responsibility in supporting that? And then if it doesn't happen, what will be our responsibility? Does it change?
That's a great question, and I always want to echo that moment that Jimmy's in Istanbul trying to pull himself together, trying to pick up the pieces, trying to recoup from trying to commit suicide, and King's assassination, and he's trying to get No Name in the Street out of his head, what he called that mighty motherfucker, right? He's trying to get that out of his head, right? And this reporter, I think it was from Ebony, asks him about hope. And then he says, hope is invented every day, right? So we don't want to say hope is some Pollyannish notion. It's a blues-soaked hope. How do we pull hope out of the tragic, out of the darkness, out of the disaster, out of the catastrophe? So where's my hope? My hope is in everyday, ordinary people. It has to be, right? because we can be miraculous in the midst of our disastrous selves. And as I see young people in the middle of a pandemic risking their lives, actually not just young people, risking their lives, people across the board, black, white, old, young, brown, risking their lives to speak truth to the way in which policing has devastated Black communities, speak truth to this public lynching. We've opened up space. Now, we can't invest everything in elections,
Right.
but we know we got to get this dude out of office.
For sure.
And then we know we have to say that it's not sufficient to make the case for normalcy in this moment. I'm reminded of King's speech down in 1965 after the Selma March in Montgomery. And there's a passage where he says, people want us to go back to normal. And then he starts listing what was normal.
Right. Right.
So let's start listing what was normal before Trump.
Exactly.
That ain't good.
No.
And so what we have to do is to push Biden, to push those who think that getting Trump out of office is the answer.
Right.
We have to push them to embrace a more radical, not necessarily, and radical here is just simply fundamental change, a more radical vision of how we can be together differently.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't, because I make this juxtaposition in the book, we can either re-elect Donald Trump or we can vote for safety. And if we do either one of them, we seal our fate. Safety is not our salvation in this moment.
And I think I think a lot of people feel that. That's what they want. They want to alleviate the pressure of the consternation inside when you're in this moment. They want to come to some sort of stasis and exhale and go, whew, okay. But if that's what you're desirous of and you can't sit in it right now, it's like you're going to be sitting in it forever. It's like it's going to come to you. You're not going to have the luxury to go, oh, I'm over that.
Yeah, and my son's children will have to deal with it.
That's right.
And so, I was sitting here when my son left to go protest, and he was walking out, and we had to have a conversation about the risk. And I was trying to get him to understand that he wasn't just risking himself, but he was risking his mother and me. I found myself playing that card, and I was stunned that I would do it, right? But then I understood. Then he explained it to me, and then I thought about it, and I said, "Damn, he has to do this. I had to do it.
Yeah.
My daddy had to do it. His daddy had to do it. His daddy before him had to do it. And if we don't make the right choice, if we don't risk everything right here, right now, my son's children will have to do it. I'm tired of being on a racial hamster wheel, bro.
And that was one of the most compelling and strongest parts. And as a father, hit me in the book too, as well, when you speak about the responsibility that we have to those that have come before. And as we're talking about now, those who will come after, if we cannot sit in this moment, if we don't face the danger of this moment and really, really deal with the lie and deal with the truth, and then find some way to holistically come together and define ourselves and in and of ourselves and move forward. It's a very daunting task, but there's nothing else on the books to do.
Jimmy called the folks in the 1960s improbable aristocrats. Right? Those babies who integrated the schools in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Those sharecroppers who risk everything to register to vote. Those people we don't know who lined the bottom of the Mississippi River.
Yes.
That moment when Dave Dennis told Jimmy, I heard it through the grapevine as they were searching for Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, that they were pulling up bodies decapitated. He said, what does it matter if we find them? We're finding all of these people who have been murdered and assassinated, killed, just because they wanted to vote, right? I mean, if we don't dare to be otherwise, my Lord. What are we resolving ourselves to in some way?
Exactly. Forgive the segue. ham-handed. I mean, I could do this with you we could do this for many hours. We
Yes,
only have
sir.
one, but I would love to do it again if you ever want to. We can do
Of
this.
course, too.
But you mentioned art and
Yeah.
how it plays in James Baldwin, who was a serious writer, an essayist, a poet, a playwright, a novelist, a screenwriter, you know, working on the Malcolm X movie. And I guess, you know, my question, I'm trying to form a question is there. Do you think there was any science to the iterations of his writing? Was it him speaking in the form that he needed at that time, that he thought the world needed? Was he responding to what he felt was required of him at times? Or was he just in his creative place and just moving through what he felt like he needed to move through? What is your opinion on
You know, that's such a great question. I can't wait to hear what you think too. Because, so we know that Jimmy finds language. I mean, first of all, he's just a high school graduate. I mean,
that? That's unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. Just like Richard Wright dropped out of school in the 8th grade. It's just blows your mind, just sheer genius, right? Um, so we know he finds language. He finds writing in the King James Bible and in Henry James and his ear, hearing Black speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that the combination of these things shape what he puts on the page. So to hear Jimmy speak, right, is to almost kind of see or to experience the sentence on the page in real time, right?
You too, by the way. I mean, I'm just gonna cut in here for a second and say, listening to you on tape is also, I also have that experience, and the swells and dips and the musicality of it. And you reference Coltrane, you know, you reference the sort of the urgency that music, you know, that Coltrane finds in you know, A Love Supreme and some of those movements and all of his work really. But really hearing your voice as, you know, listening to it is also very evocative and really gives an idea of how the music plays and the artistry plays. But I'm sorry, I just had to cut in there.
But you know, that's that homiletic tradition. I went to Morehouse. I'm drenched in Baptist waters, even though I was raised Catholic. But Baldwin was this child preacher, so he knows, and that's Black America's first theater, the church.
Yes.
Right. And so he sees. So there's all of that. But then, after King is assassinated, he has to try to figure out at the level of form how to respond. And this is the thing that I'm trying to do at the. It's a kind of professional argument, kind of an arcane academic argument. I'm trying to say, look, the late Baldwin is really important because he's dealing with betrayal, wound, and trauma, and trying to figure out how to capture that at the level of form.
Mm-hmm.
So when you read No Name in the Street, published in 1972, the first book after King's assassination, where Billy D. Williams said he never thought Jimmy could bounce back from that moment of despair. The book is almost structured like trauma and wound. Memories, fractured memories, present returns to past returns to present.
Unreliable memories, like, no, I'm not sure if that one's really, but it's impacting me now as a reality and I'm dealing with it.
And he tells you that in the very beginning of the book. Right. You know, my mind is doing things, right? And then I think he's also making a move because his we changes. He's trying to figure out what I could do with Black vernacular language.
Right.
How do I deploy Black speech? Right. What are the ways in which I can think about bringing Black love without the white gaze into view? So if you read If Beale Street Could Talk, and you see what Barry Jenkins tried to do with it visually, right? You can see that it's not a white gaze that's impacting, right, what's happening there. Toni Morrison echoes this. When you think about Morrison and Beloved and the way memory gets fractured, she even calls it disremembering, right? I think she's in direct conversation with this moment. Or even when Toni says, you know, I want to write without that white person on my shoulder. And what would that mean to tell our story without having to worry about a particular gaze that I have to translate it for, right? But, you know, it's like me reading Dostoevsky or Chekhov or Gogol. I don't get the jokes because they're particular, but there's something about what I'm reading, right?
Right.
It's the same thing with Joyce. There's something about these Irish folk that move me. It's something about us without the need for translation that Jimmy's working with at the level of form. So I think No Name in the Street is perhaps his most important piece of nonfiction. And I think as an artist, he's still bearing witness. And he's trying to figure out how to do so, right, in these later moments. And this is why I use the Coltrane analogy now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where is Coltrane in his head with Sheets of Sound?
Yes.
What is he doing?
Yeah.
Or like Miles when Bitches Brew. You know this because I loved you in my, right? What is Miles thinking as he's innovating across time?
Yeah.
Right. And so this is what the artist is all about, right? At least to me.
Well, absolutely. And that's why it's such a great, that's why I love your treatment of the material, because it required you to bring yourself to it in a way that if it was just academia and if it was just sort of like a scholarly take on Ibid 3, and this is what he said,
Exactly.
You can refer to that and that. It's like, no, I'm going to play jazz with myself and with James and walk with James Baldwin and bring myself to challenge myself. And something you also talk about continually in the book, how you had to deal with how it made you feel. And yeah, I love the eye roll. Talk about that you could not, honestly deal with the material without first honestly dealing with yourself.
Yeah, Baldwin has, he believes in the Socratic dictum that the unexamined life isn't worth living.
Mm.
And he has this, I reduce it to this kind of formulation that a precondition to say anything about the world is that you have to examine yourself. Before you can say anything about the messiness of the world, you have to deal with your own mess.
Mm.
And so I barely survived writing the book. When I was, after I figured out that, I signed the contract, right, Doc? And I got the money and everything, and I'm a year in, and I haven't written a sentence.
Wow.
Because the book, I couldn't do a biography.
Mm.
And I knew I needed to do something else. And it wasn't until I was in Heidelberg that the book came together. And then, so I'm writing, and every time I look up, I got Jameson. I'm drinking like a fish.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out why. Because I ran from the storm of Trump into the chaos of Trump into the storm of Jimmy's life.
Right.
And he was forcing me to deal with the fact that, and I told this to Mark Lamont Hill, that I was this vulnerable little boy, and that my father had deposited this fear in my gut from when I was little. And in order for me to be able to walk this walk, I had to make explicit what was in my gut. Mm-hmm. But then I came across this interview with him and Nikki Giovanni. And when Nikki told Jimmy, lie to me. Right. And you said, you're going out here being, having to, wear the mask with these white folks. And then you come home to me and you beat me upside my head and you treat me to lie to me. And at that moment, I remember watching it going, I'm looking at Baldwin's face and he didn't know what to make of what she just said to him. Mm-hmm. And then she was saying, your narcissism leads you to forget that there are people in your orbit that you have to love. And sometimes you got to lie to them because you love them. So I'm sitting up here tackling the scaffolding of my own lies and going, how am I going to survive, man? How am I going to survive? And I still got my Jameson, so.
We texted our little pictures to each other. Like, oh, that's what you're on? Well, I'm
That's what you're on? And my cigar.
And speaking to love, which is a great, I'm looking at this, which I love this line. Love opens up the rusted lid of the heart. Yeah. Love opens up the rusted lid of the heart. And that's something that is also thematic in James Baldwin's work, in the work that you focused on and how he always came back to that idea. And how does that work in 2020? How does that work with us now when we're in a moment where we understand how rage works for sure? And we understand that in many ways, had we not had that moment, that the changes that have been on the horizon that are now in some ways being pushed through, that we have to continue to make sure they do get pushed through, never would have happened. We know if it had not erupted, if that rusted lid of rage had not erupted, that we would not be in this moment. So then how do we come back, or how do we find, or what is within that rage, this love, this idea of love, and how we have to come back to that, and that being the most powerful force.
Yeah, you know, and I'm playing in that moment on Toni Morrison's Beloved. Because Paul D, the character in Beloved, he has, after Alfred, Georgia, he has to put everything in a rusted tin can.
Yeah.
So I'm echoing in that moment, you know, I'm playing that lick, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a quote. It's like a jazz quote.
Exactly.
I just appreciate that in the book so much, because so many people would be like, I'm not trying to like ape that. I have to come up with my own way. It's like, no, that when it happens, when Miles plays that lick, he's tipping his hat. You know what I'm saying? That's what
exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to give it up to who I'm pointing to something in that moment. And you know, I've had this experience, I'm talking with you, right? And I'm getting chill bumps as I'm talking with you. And I've had this experience throughout writing the book, where something just happens, right? So Reverend Barber sent, I didn't burn this one, but Reverend Barber sent me a candle, a Jimmy Saints candle, you know, as I'm writing, because he said, you got to finish it, right? So as you're talking about love, I start flipping through the book. I want to find this passage that I'm thinking about, and I can't find it, right? But then suddenly the book just opens up to this passage. Check it out. There is absolutely no salvation without love. This is Jimmy. There's absolutely no salvation without love. This is the wheel in the middle of the wheel. Salvation does not divide, salvation connects. It is not the exclusive property of any dogma, creed, or church. It keeps the channel open between oneself and however one wishes to name that which is greater than oneself. It has nothing to do with one's fortunes or one's circumstances and one's passage through this world. It is a mighty fortress, even in the teeth of ruin or at the gates of death. Love, in this moment, in this time, right, is the grand corrector.
Yes.
I mean, I could preach it. Love, and he's not talking about this sentimental love. He's talking about this love that's rooted in being vulnerable, that's rooted in being open. You know, when I teach that last sentence and when I teach that penultimate sentence in The Fire Next Time, when he says, we like lovers must blah, 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 to achieve our country. And I said, that's not agape, y'all. He said, like lovers.
Yeah.
That's eros. That's when you're standing in front of someone you love and you are naked and they see all of your vulnerabilities. They see all of the blotches, the wounds. You're risking yourself in that moment, right? So when we talk about love, Doc, as a political, powerful, moral, ethical force, we're talking about a transformational relationship with others. And I've been saying this over and over again, and I don't know quite what it means yet, but we got to figure out how to be together differently. And only love can be the anchor of that. Does that make sense? Is that answering the question?
It makes complete sense intellectually. And it's something that has to like sift down into, you know, emotions and into the soul, because I agree. And I think that we are so siloed, and I'm guilty of it 100%. And so rage is easier. Anger is easier.
Yeah.
Separation is easier. It's easier to cut off and push away and to excise. It's much harder to find a way to come together and to, again, not be diplomatic in some sense where you get 3 and I get 3 and I get 2 and not, we're not that, but really but really some deeper way on a human level, on a soul level, to appreciate a being that even if they don't recognize it, and this is something else that's in the work a lot, like you're saying, the disease is that you believe it. The white supremacy problem is the white people's problem. It's not the black people's problem. We may be on the shit end of the stick because of it, but it's not as if you are devoid of the pain and the sickness that is taking place. That's your sickness.
Yeah.
And so to go, we are all in this bath and we are all having to figure out, we're not going anywhere. And, you know, I mean, there've been a lot of movies with people getting off this planet and going to other places, but I think we're stuck here. I think we're stuck here.
Yeah.
We can see that this is a worldwide awareness that is happening now. You know, a huge demonstration in London just a couple of days ago. This isn't going away. This Band-Aid has been ripped off. So now, moving toward the salve, is it too soon? Does it need to bleed more? Do we need to let the air be in this? Do we need to stay in this moment more? When is the time? We won't know if there's a time necessarily to go, okay, let's start to figure out a salve. Is the salve just in attacking the lie constantly? These are the questions that as I was reading this, I kept talking to my wife and just going, damn, like I don't want to think about this shit. I think about all this shit every night. I gotta think about this. But that's kind of what is required. And I think that's the love too, right? The wrestling with it.
You know, I'm coming back to this phrase that Cornel West is famous for. Justice is what love looks like in public. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
So if that's true, and I think it is, right? To bring it down.
Yeah.
Right? As you said, to get it from here to down here.
Yeah.
What does it mean to commit yourself to building a just world? Right? That's what I say to my white friends all the time. And I should be clear. I make a distinction between white people and people who happen to be white.
Please, thank you. Please say that again, because I think often that is that's what I was saying. We're not talking about you, Patrick, and you, Sue, and you, Jim. We're talking about an idea of whiteness. Talking about an idea.
Yeah, you know, Jimmy makes this distinction in The Evidence of Things Not Seen, the book he wrote about the Atlanta child murders. Right, and trying to figure out what does it mean for all these babies to be for these babies to be killed with black people, black people in power. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's one of his most important books, although people tend to dismiss it. And he says he makes that distinction. You know, I happen to love a lot of people who happen to be white, and these are these folks who, like Wendell Berry in The Hidden Wound, will say racism comes to them as naturally as their language. Right. But they're engaged in this ongoing work to deconstruct it, to kind of hold it at bay. They're not invested in the idea that whiteness ought to accord them advantage and disadvantage. And so these are people who are actively trying to disrupt a world organized along the lines of the value gap. And then there are white people. And those are people who are invested in the ideology of whiteness. Those are people who can't understand and see themselves apart from, the value gap. That is where advantages being doled out because one is white, right? So we need to make a distinction. And that distinction is really important because it opens us up to a different way of thinking about how we can fight this fight together.
Yes.
That we're not just drawing these hard lines based upon political ideas of race and the like. So justice is what love looks like in public. And so when I say to my white friends, put that in as a shorthand, and those people who happen to be white and those who are trying their damnedest, what can I do to help? I get that damn question all the time. Oh my God.
All of us have now. Yes.
Oh my God, I didn't know. What can I do to help? And then where can I make a change? And then you say, well, first of all, I don't need charity. We don't need charity. What do you take to be a more just world? Let's join together to build a more just world, the best of the Black freedom tradition. What we were arguing for us benefited everybody.
Right.
It wasn't lift all boats either.
Right.
We were talking about the specific hell we were catching, but we knew the world that would be created in the aftermath of addressing the hell we were catching would be a better world.
And more just and more equitable.
And exactly. So justice is what love looks like in public. So if we are about this love work, then we're about this justice work. Yes. And I think that's the key.
Yes. And that question that comes, what can I do? It's something that I know when I was doing a lot of the Darfur work and the stuff in Sudan. I would ask that question back, which you did in a forum. I'm saying, what can you do? I'm saying, what can I do? What can you do? Where do you have influence at your job, at your work,
right.
school,
right.
at church, in your PTA, in a community order? What are you doing? What have you done to address the inequity? You know what it is. You can.
Exactly.
That's something that no one can say now. I mean, very few people can say I didn't know. That at least that's over. We can't have the I wasn't aware. It's like, okay, well, we're all aware now. Everyone's awake.
Right.
So now, what can you do?
Right. Because you saw that 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Absolutely.
You sat there and you watched it just like a whole bunch of other folk did. Come on now.
Yeah, we all know. We all know. Yeah. We're getting close to our time. I have some questions from the audience. I'm probably going to get to a couple of these. But this is an interesting one, given what we were just talking about. Gentleman writes, lately it's occurred to me as a pale white Irishman that almost everything I think I know about race in America, I learned or stole from James Baldwin. Now that fellow white people are asking what they can do or who they can read to better understand the reality of Black Americans, would you recommend the complete works of Baldwin as the essential primer? Or are there ways in which Baldwin's views might lead them to an incomplete or incorrect picture in some ways, or indeed lead them perhaps to despair?
Well, you got to walk through that brook of fire. You can't, that you got to finger that despair. So I would say yes. Read Baldwin. Get the collected works of his nonfiction, The Library of America or The Price of the Ticket. I think the evidence of things not seen should be included in the next edition of that Library of America edition. But I think that book is important. I'm always, that last line and I'm going to be quicker here. That last line in No Name in the Street. It is terrible to watch people cling to their captivity and insist on their own destruction. I think Black people have always felt this about America and Americans, and have always seen spinning above the thoughtless American head the shape of the wrath to come. That's the prophecy. That's the reckoning. That's in Baldwin's corpus. But as you read that, you're going to read something about love and its overwhelming power. So yes.
Read Baldwin.
Read Baldwin.
Yeah, read all of it.
including the fiction, the plays.
Yeah, because it gives you another way in. And that's what I'm saying. You see this. I mean, there was a period, and you talk about it in the Reckoning in that chapter, sort of like the attacks he was getting from inside, from his own people, from those that we look to now as in scholarly and read their works and go out, that there was sort of like a shut up and artist to him. When he would move more into the political, they were saying, do you have to come over here, Mario Puzo? I don't want to name out everybody who did it because it felt very much like when I get to shut up and act, but it felt like that. Like, why are you bringing this part of you now to this part of the issue? Stay over there. That's where we're comfortable with you. Again, this idea of we need to be comfortable. We need to be able to not wrestle with shit. We want you here. We want to be here. Do that.
And he knew the cost of doing it. He should have got a Nobel. He should have got, he should have, every award under Baldwin knew and he still did it.
That's right.
Because he told those high school students, those college students at Howard, I will never betray you. And he never did.
Yeah. Deep. Another question. Charlene A. Carruthers, in her book, Unapologetic, you ready? A Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements has a moving chapter, chapter 2, entitled Reviving the Black Radical Imagination. Where do I, Don Cheadle, and Eddie Glaude see James Baldwin in this Black radical imagination? And how does this Black radical imagination continue to evolve?
He's at the heart of it for me, right? I think when we read Jimmy and we read him closely, he queers Black politics. And as an artist, he may not sound like he's talking about capitalism, although he embraces Yankee Doodle socialism as he echoes Bobby Seale. He understands that American imperial power and racialized capitalism is at the heart of suffering. He understands that. But I think at the heart of it, though, is this insistence on questioning the categories that bind our feet, right? And that is a liberatory gesture that he gives voice to as an artist who's concerned about the well-being of human beings generally. What do you think?
Well, I think it's something that it's also interesting when I'm thinking about your book where you talk about sort of the masculinity that has dominated at that period, especially in the 60s during that time with the Panthers, this sort of idea that that strength means I'll fuck you up, that it was specifically about this sort of like, I got it, this very masculine yang energy that Jimmy questioned, and of course from who he was just the embodiment of questioning that, but challenged that in a way, as we're talking about, is this who you are? Is this you only in reflection to that lie and only a reaction to that thing that you have to push back against? Is this the true you down there? Is this, does it serve us to do this? Or, you know, and so all of those questions, I think for me, it just raises a lot of questions, but I love your verbiage of it, the querying of it, and what is, you know, what does that verb mean? You know, how does that, the reimagining of what that means to be a strong Black, to have identity. What is that?
Yeah, you know, and I always like to tell a story. You know, when the Panthers, I think it was the Panthers, he was at a thing with Betty Shabazz and she had her kids. And a guy was doing some gunplay and he had an epileptic fit, Don, and started shooting.
Oh.
And everybody just broke. And Baldwin was on the stage with Betty Shabazz and the girls. And people just died, you know, because the gunfire is going on. Yeah. And they say Jimmy yelled, "The babies," and ran out and covered them. You see?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
Ran out and covered them, right?
Yeah.
There's a sense in which he wants to, again, when I say he wants to free us from these categories, he's not just talking about Black and white, right? He wants to free us into being different kinds of human beings. And that's a radical gesture, Doc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's dangerous. It doesn't allow you the safety. Again, it doesn't allow you the comfort that we want.
Right.
It forces you to look at a person holistically. And that's not something that I think we teach a lot. That's not something, we give lip service to it, but I don't think that's something that really is baked into how we are taught to appreciate and see each other.
Yeah, it's a different kind of meaning of freedom, and we got to be clear on what we mean by it when we invoke it, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, it's an hour went by. It felt like 5 minutes. I could do this all day. I could do this again. I have many more questions. I'm so appreciative of you. Thank you so much for being a voice that we need right now. Thank you for continuing to bear witness. Thank you for speaking truth to power as you've continued to do. And we'll talk more offline, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Indeed. And on the other side of this pandemic, we're going to get us a Jameson or something.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you. Don, you said you'd like to do it again. Eddie, you said you'd like to do it again. Let's do it before November 3rd. Please. Depending on your schedules, of course, but this discussion could go on for hours and hours, and we all want to hear more. So while people go to writersblockpresents.com to get the link to Eso Won Bookstore to get your book, they can think about and look forward to the two of you reconvening with Writer's Block before November. Does that sound okay?
Oh yeah, we got to chop it up about that election for sure.
Totally.
That'll be the next thing we talk about for sure.
How we vomited up Donald Trump. Words to live by. But let's hope we change that. Thank you both so much, and thanks to all of you for listening and tuning in. See you soon.
Thank you, Doc. Appreciate you.
You too. Right back.